two key elements of the G20 summit. Number one, the much anticipated Modi-Biden bilateral meet that is going to take place today, and the packed schedules of both these global leaders during this significant event. Now, in just a matter of hours, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the United States President Joe Biden are set to meet for the second time in just 3 months. Their rendezvous marks a significant step in intensifying the strategic partnership between the two nations. Now, the leaders will deliberate on matters spanning from bilateral, minilateral, multilateral domains with a special focus, albeit on defense and advanced technology cooperation. The talks are also going to delve into crucial areas such as clean energy, trade, and high technology. Now, notably, the leaders will discuss the pivotal role of nuclear power in combating climate change. How does that happen? And it's going to include the prospects of producing small and modular reactors in India for export outside. Moreover, this meeting is expected to breathe new life into the nuclear deal unveiled during the 2005 and 2008 tenure. It will also involve a review of the past agreements, possibly shaping plans for a Quad summit around India's Republic Day in 2024, emphasizing the importance of sustaining the high-level political interaction between India and the United States. The Delhi has completely been decked up as the proverbial bride. Today, later in the evening, United States President POTUS Joe Biden is going to land in New Delhi. Now, amidst the G20 summit, there's also a keen interest in reviving the Black Sea Grain Initiative. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres is pushing for its revival. This initiative, initially signed back in 2022, aims to avert massive grain shortages caused by the war. It facilitates grain exports from Russia and Ukraine, which is vital for global food security. However, the deal lapsed in July this year, on the July 17th, as Russia, Vladimir Putin, refused renewal, citing unkempt promises. Now, the G20 leaders are now working to find solutions to restart the exports from blockaded Ukrainian exports. Yet, resolving this issue potentially means granting Russia more financial access despite the ongoing sanctions. Recent meetings between Turkey's Erdogan and Russia's Putin have laid the groundwork for the new proposals for Russia to consider as well. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden's schedule is packed to the brim. Air Force One will touch down at Delhi Airport at 7 p.m. today, where he'll be warmly received by Union Minister General V.K. Singh, followed by a grand welcome with a cultural program that's also planned out. Subsequently, Biden will head to Prime Minister Narendra Modi's residence at Lok Kalyan Marg from his hotel, where their significant talks will take place. Beyond the Modi-Biden meet, the president, after the entire G20 summit is wrapped up, is scheduled to participate in the G20 summit on the 9th and 10th of September, after which Biden is set to travel to Hanoi in Vietnam, rounding out his action-packed journey. Now, we have with us experts on the panel. We also have with us, top diplomats and former ambassadors. Joining us on the broadcast is Ambassador Deepak Vora, former diplomat, and Ambassador Suresh K. Goyal. A very warm welcome to the both of you. Gentlemen, we're going to talk about, G20. Deepak Vora and News 9 have constantly been talking about News 9 as well, about ASEAN, I beg your pardon, and the East Asia Summit. But do stay on with us, gentlemen, because let's quickly listen into what Janet Yellen and several other stakeholders had to say after they touched down in the national capital. What did they have to say? We're going to break apart those reactions as well. First and foremost, Janet Yellen, let's listen into her.
This week also provides an opportunity to discuss debt relief. We continue to support efforts to provide predictable, orderly, and timely debt relief to countries, including under the Common Framework for Debt Treatment, where progress has been too slow. As a second priority area, we remain committed to extensive and strategic multilateral action in response to Russia's war on Ukraine. The price cap and sanctions, both the result of unprecedented global collaboration, are having powerful impacts on Russia's ability to wage its brutal and unjust war. We also remain committed to support for Ukraine and recently put forward a supplemental funding request. There's been bipartisan support for this funding to date, and it's critical that we continue to provide timely economic assistance. During my visit to Kyiv earlier this year, I saw firsthand the importance of this assistance in enabling Ukraine's resistance on the front lines. We're also grateful for the involvement of our partners, including the €50 billion package proposed by the European Union and the $15 billion International Monetary Fund program, which has been essential to Ukraine's efforts to implement reforms and stabilize the economy. And we need to remain focused on addressing the devastating consequences of the war, including its impact on food security. Russia's withdrawal from the Black Sea Grain Initiative is deeply concerning and is particularly being felt by low and middle-income countries.
Well, all right. Janet Yellen, the Secretary of Treasury of the United States. I'm going to quickly get the ball rolling and bring in Ambassador Vora in on this one. Ambassador Vora, we just heard Janet Yellen talk about how the restoration of global finance is going to be, a key and hot topic. If the IMF's MD is and her reaction is anything to go by, 3/4 of the global growth, as per IMF, will be with the emerging economies. But before all of that, and I also have with me, a transcript of the press gaggle by Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre and the NSA Jake Sullivan aboard Air Force One on their way to Ramstein Air Base in Germany, where President Biden is supposed to take a little halt and then embark towards New Delhi. What do you think is going to be one of the most important topics to talk about? There is, of course, the China issue. There is, of course, the financial stability issue. There is, of course, the issue of global trade and investment. There is, of course, the issue of defense technology, jet deals, MQ-9 Reaper drones, 5G, 6G, and of course, let's not forget the Black Sea Grain Initiative. That is something, New Delhi is being pipped to be the venue where it might just be revived. What, according to you, is going to be one of the key, topics that is going to be discussed? What are you anticipating? It's going to be a dinner with Joe Biden and Prime Minister Modi, the second meet in just 3 months.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure, sir, to be with you on your channel. You are amazing, you yourself, and to learn from you, plus the other senior people who will be on your panel, whose knowledge is much greater than mine. Where I am at the moment in New York, the time is 03:41 in the morning, so if I fall asleep, please wake me up. The weather is 23 degrees Celsius and the barometer is falling, which means there's likely to be rain in a little while. Now, in 2023, this character called Joe Biden is obsessed with defeating Russia in Ukraine. India, on the other hand, wants peace and dialogue. That is one area in which perhaps the best definition would be we have agreed to disagree. Why is India interested in America and vice versa? You talked about Narendra Modi's path-breaking visit in June 2023 to the United States. That is still being talked about. Why this mutual interest? What are the areas of convergence and divergence? I won't go into the details. Professor Google will tell you everything about it. But there are n number of bilateral agreements and bilateral visits and bilateral conclaves. The most important factor is the trust factor. Sir, we've traversed a rocky trail. You know this. At one time, we were defined as estranged democracies. But the best definition of the new US-India relationship in 2023 is the catch line of the old Virginia Slims advertisement of the 1970s, when it was introduced as a slim, thin cigarette for women. And there was an image I still remember of a young lady who was smoking. And then it said, "You've come a long way, baby," which means that was the liberation of the American women. So we've made very clever bets on each other. There are changing global relationships. There's this talk of a new world order, whatever that means. Basically, it means that today, India and the United States have many more points of convergence than they do in terms of disagreement. And where there are disagreements, we are able to manage them. So the bilateral relationship seems to grow and grow like the roots of the banyan tree that becomes so strong that if someone were to cut down the tree, the roots would sustain the rump and it would rise again. So for the United States, India is a synonym for integrity. We are a big market, no question. We have the ability to absorb high technology, no question. IT, we are the supreme global power, no question about that. The United States remains the ultimate dream for hundreds of millions of Indians. I don't know of a single Indian family that doesn't have a relative or a cousin or a 94th relative who's in the United States. We have 2 kids, both live in the US. I'm visiting them. So there is nothing that really should divide us except our perceptions of how international relations have to be managed. Let me just conclude by saying that America has rediscovered India. India was always very friendly with the United States, but America now understands where the future lies. America, welcome home to India.
Well, absolutely. You know, a great precursor to that meeting that's going to happen in the evening as well, Ambassador Vora. And, you know, I'm just going to take that pertinent point that you made of how these two nations have postured themselves when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine war. Ambassador Suresh K. Goyal with us also on the broadcast. You know, Ambassador Goyal, Ambassador Vora spoke about how Biden is hell-bent on defeating Putin. On the other hand, Prime Minister Modi, on all these global summits, from ASEAN to the East Asia Summit to, the Congress, the US Congress, he goes and says, this is not an era of war. We must strive towards peace. How do these two nations that, you know, are being said have intensified their political and diplomatic dialogue and their relationship, their ties? I mean, we're talking about jet engine technology, MQ-9 Reaper drones, backing each other financially. But will we be able to see each other eye to eye when we're talking about the Ukraine war? Because that is going to be one of the hot topics on the table, this G20.
Kabir, thank you very much for letting me be on this show. You see the danger of being on the same panel as Ambassador Deepak Vora is, that by the time he finishes, he has done all the issues. And then other panelists have to grapple with what to say. That's a problem of being in company with the giants. And therefore, give me a second to really think of what I should say in addition to what Deepak Vora has said. All right, Ukraine. You mentioned two issues. Ukraine, that is the Black Sea deal. And, let me deal with Ukraine first. I think both USA and India know what each other's position is. And there is no possibility of those positions coming close at all. Ambassador Jaishankar Minister Jaishankar has already said that it's a European problem. Why do you want us to really get into a European problem? And I think he's very right. I don't think that President Biden and Prime Minister Modi, knowing each other's positions on these issues, will really spend too much of time on this. They will leave it to their number twos and the other people who know enough and who know what can be done. I think the meeting between the two this time is going to be really on more strategic issues. And those strategic issues will not be just what kind of defense deals, what kind of technology transfer, engines, this and that. All those are sorted out. And I don't think that there is anything more that can be done about them. What is important, however, here is that both India, USA, and the other countries in the world and in Southeast Asia and Indo-Pacific, they have one dragon in the China shop, and that dragon has become increasingly muscular, is increasingly trying to change the world order according to what he thinks should be done. And in that world order, the other countries have no place of their choice on how they should be actually working on their economies, etc., etc. Number two, that dragon in the China shop is trying to basically introduce economic colonization once again by using the debt diplomacy. And now, to add to the debt diplomacy, the world is talking about debt restructuring by IMF and World Bank, and most of the money which comes to these countries, poor countries, because of this debt restructuring and supported by G20, etc., most of the money will go to China. Should G20, I think the issue that the two should really grapple with also is, should this restructuring of debt lead to increasing benefits For China, I don't think that should be done. So there has to be sufficient amount of insurance built into any kind of economic packaging that the benefit actually goes to the countries which have been hurt rather than China, which actually hurt them. That is number two. Number three, you have seen recently what China has done to the territorial claims. Almost the entire region is up in the arms. The problem is ASEAN countries, other countries in Southeast Asia, they want to have peace in the region, but they do not want to have peace at the cost of having to deal with China through military conflict. They don't have the capacity to deal in the military conflict. And for any of these things, they depend upon either the USA or Europe or India to take China on militarily. Last point in the same series of my small elements. China knows very well that the USA is very far off in Pacific. The only country in the region which can take on China is India. And therefore, China is rather dreadful when India comes closer to the USA in a strategic kind of an embrace. And that questions, that challenges China. So that is a kind of map that we are talking about. In that kind of a map, the conversations between the two are going to be how to build this coalition in Southeast Asia, to ensure that our order, global order, does not get disrupted to the extent that we do not have any potential, not to grow, but even to survive. The point on that is, I think, one platform, the only one platform I can think of which can work in this capacity is G20. Even though China is there, but China can be contained on that platform like it happened this time. China knew that they cannot get their way through on G20 this time, and therefore she chose not to come.
And it seems like the Prime Minister is also cornering China on all these global summits as well.
Absolutely.
And it's not just the Prime Minister, it's the United States as well. Take a look at this. I'll just read out a little portion from the transcript of the press gaggle, which was done on board the Air Force One just a couple of minutes back. It says, and this is, I'm quoting Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor of the United States. One thing I would note, because I got the question a couple of times in the press briefing room about China, and the fact that Xi Jinping is not coming, whether they would play a spoiler and so forth. I'm not going to handicap what will happen at this summit in this regard, but I would point out that if you look at the hosts of the G20 over the next few years, we have India this year, Brazil next year, South Africa the following year, and then the United States. And I think along with those three countries, India, Brazil, South Africa and the United States has a deep stake in stewarding the G20 and making sure that it remains a central mechanism for global coordination on all the major challenges we face. So certainly China is, the focus on China is definitely going to be there. But picking up from what you spoke about in terms of the debt diplomacy, I want Ambassador Vora to come in here. Ambassador Vora, Ambassador Goel spoke about debt diplomacy, and debt restructuring is something that most nations are going to be interested in speaking about this time around. I'm going to again quote the IMF MD who said that 3/4 of the global growth is going to be on the shoulders of the developing nations, the developing economies, people who are already reeling under debt. Take a look at the debt that we have at a global level. How do you think, what is the pragmatic way of battling and tackling this sort of a challenge at a platform like the G20, Ambassador Vora?
One of the main issues, as Ambassador Goel has so eloquently put it, and his knowledge is much greater than mine, the issues that will be discussed is debt. So many countries of the global south, as we call it, are reeling under unsustainable debt. We are told 70 countries are in debt distress. Now, these are figures by that racket called the International Monetary Fund. You've probably heard of it. They're talking about this, and so many more are rising, etc. Then there used to be another joke called the Belt and Road Initiative. And that too is now deader than the dodo, the Mauritian bird. Now, the Mauritian bird, by the way, the dodo is being revived through artificial intelligence. Nobody is going to revive that BRI nonsense. China is frightened when it's asked to restructure debt of anybody, because their God is money, even though communism doesn't recognize any God. So if it's asked that you have to take a haircut, debt restructuring essentially means that you lose either the interest or a certain amount of the principal, whatever. China cannot accept that. So if we've talked of debt trap, if the world, many countries of the world are in a debt trap, China is in a credit trap. These guys, sir, I know I serve as special advisor in 3 African countries, and all 3, they've turned around and told the Chinese, sorry, buddy, we can't repay the money you gave us because wherever that money went, whatever projects that were built by your companies are pretty useless. We don't need them. So just take the projects away. Now, how do you take away a project? How do you take away the building that you've constructed or the equipment that you've installed? So China is beginning to realize this, that a world with Chinese characteristics, as they like to talk about it, we don't want it. So you keep it inside China. Even the Chinese people don't want a world with communist characteristics. Therefore, what I see, China is the elephant in the room. There's no question about it. China is the biggest enemy of the world, of G20. China is the biggest enemy of China itself, communist China. So what we see happening in the meetings between Joe Biden and Narendra Modi, that they will build on the areas of convergence rather than those of divergence. And the areas of convergence are so many. There's trade, there's climate change, there is high technology. India has a practically insatiable appetite for going high-tech in whatever areas we wanted to. India has a tremendous reputation in IT that goes back to the year 2000. You're too young to remember there was global panic at the so-called Y2K bug, that it was going to mess up all the world's computer systems. And everybody turned around and said, hey, get the Indians to do it because they are the best in it, which is a fact. We are the best. So these are the things that they are going to look at. They're also in the defense relationship between India and the United States. China is certainly a factor. And if China says India is getting very close to the United States, well, buddy, you are to blame for it. We didn't go that route for many years, but then you have pushed not just us, but so many countries to reassess their relationship with you. Ambassador Goyal has talked about ASEAN not being able to take on the United States. Well, you've heard of an ASEAN nation called the Philippines. And I think 4 or 5 years ago, that former boxer who was the president of the Philippines, chap called Rodrigo Duterte, whom I know, he had said about ping pong that, oh, I love this guy, he understands my problem. And then this year, they were firing water cannons at Philippine ships and so on. And now they hate each other. You know, heaven hath no rage like love to hatred turned, nor hell a fury like a woman scorned. This is what William Congreve's The Morning Bride, this is what the Chinese ought to understand. So they have axed their own feet. They have destroyed their own image. This new map, I don't know if you have looked at it carefully. So even the moon is shown as part of China. Therefore, for Chandrayaan 3, we should have sought Chinese permission to land there. These guys are idiots, absolute idiots. They have no idea what international relations is all about. They talk of a great civilization. Well, if communist China has a civilization, I think it would be a good idea. So we have to now see the way forward. And the way forward, I see, sir, that first, we are not going to look back. What is past is past. Eyes nature has given us in the front of our heads, not behind. We are looking ahead, and I can see nothing except bright light in the future of the India-United States relationship. The US understands that the era of a so-called unipolar world is long gone. India understands that it has to move in partnership with the big people so that it can moderate their tendency to unilateral action, because the sanctions against Russia by Europe and the United States don't have any UN sanction. These have come unilaterally. Well, we don't agree with that, but then it's something that we have to learn to live with, and we are learning to live with, building on the positives. So that is the theme. Let the negatives die out.
G20, Ambassador Vora, like you put it, the Kshatriyas' club. It's about 80% of the global economy. It's about 60% of the world population, unlike the Brahmin Club, the G7. Now we have the G20. Let's not forget, let's also tell the viewers that you've got 20 member nations, but that's not all. A total of 40 countries are participating in the national capital this time around. And, we were just showcasing those visuals of Prime Minister's recent visit in June, full-blown official state visit to the United States, visuals of that particular, visit. It's not just about upping up your strategic partnership. It's about friendship. It's about camaraderie as well. If I could just play a little snippet of, that gala dinner that Jill Biden hosted, in honor of the Prime Minister back in June, and some of, the lighter moments that the two leaders shared. I'll just play out a little snippet so that the viewers can understand what happened in June and what can be expected at tonight's dinner. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what happened in the United States at the White House dinner that was hosted in honor of Prime Minister Modi. Take a look.
Mr. Prime Minister, I had an Irish grandfather named Ambrose Finnegan, And he used to say that when you give a toast and you don't have any alcohol in your glass, you must do it with your left hand. You think I'm kidding? I'm not. Toast to our partnership, to our people, to the possibilities that lie ahead, to two great friends, two great nations, and two great powers. Cheers.
Well, now, is it going to be another cheers moment, at Lok Kalyan Marg? Well, we'll have to wait and find out. But away from that lighter note, Ambassador Goel, I'm going to come to you, and I'm going to start, breaking apart what Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, had to say en route to Ramstein. He says that, the other thing I would say is that tomorrow the President will be meeting Prime Minister Modi, and it will be an opportunity to follow up on Prime Minister Modi's visit to the United States. Couple of things here, Ambassador Goel. Do pay a little bit of an attention. It says, we will see meaningful progress on a number of issues, including the General Electric jet engine issue and the MQ-9 Reapers. Let's just, put a pause there. Let's talk about the defense deal, the defense ties. In terms of, complete air superiority, how Russia has been attacking these MQ-9 Reaper drones elsewhere as well. What is going to be the benefit of MQ-9 Reaper drones in India's own fleet and General Electric, jet engine, the technology that is going to be transferred? How is that going to help our own Indian-made, light combat aircraft? So a little bit of light on that. Will it be possible for you to throw some light on that, sir?
Not too much really, because first of all, even if I knew more, I wouldn't be allowed to say it on television. But the point really here is that I really don't know very much more than what the media has reported. But I am very often in conversation with the people in the industry, and to really, important thing really is that the two politicians agreeing on certain deal is one thing, but how the deal translates into actual action on ground is another thing. Now, it's a great thing that President Biden and the American industry have agreed to transfer technology, and they agreed to manufacture these engines and the components, some of the components, about 9%. We want 15%, but that's a matter of the detail in India. I'm told that it is not simply just manufacturing a component here. The precision that is required in making all these things is a very high degree and very high technology thing. Technology, high-level technologies, are simply not like a tree that you uproot it from one place and plant it in another country. Even the tree takes time. Even the tree requires the right kind of soil, the right kind of nurturing. So the technology will require a bit of hand-holding, time till actually our people become comfortable with making those components. Now, if the USA agrees to really do all that with us, that's a super thing. That's a great thing, because that would basically mean acquiring a certain kind of independence, autonomy, what you call Atmanirbhar Bharat to some extent within India. And that is to really be truly defense autonomous. Capacity to make defense equipment and components within your country is important. You cannot make everything, but if you have a reliable partnership, it's very, very useful. And Kabir, after this, whatever question you put, but I do want to speak on Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam for a minute whenever you give me time.
Absolutely. I will certainly come back to the theme of G20 and, one family, one earth, one future. That's something that the Prime Minister has been talking about, not just for G20 or in the run-up to G20, but way ahead of, the G20 summit. But Ambassador Vora, would you like to come in here? Because, for the larger multitude, the MQ-9 Reaper drone deal was something that was done and dusted in the United States now, wasn't it? What kind of issues are we trying to iron out now? I know we're looking for some maintenance, a maintenance HQ in India or somewhere, near the Indian mainland, so that our own people can go and start working in those workshops. But what else apart from that? What are the issues that we're essentially looking to iron out?
Well, there are American regulations, American rules, American laws that govern such deals. But at this point of time, with an administration and a Congress that is totally favorably inclined to India, these will be sorted out. So you might recall that it was in the middle of June 2023 that the National Security Advisors met in New Delhi, and identified, along with industry. Industry from both sides was represented. Certain key sectors in critical and emerging technologies, what we call CET, for cooperation, such as space, artificial intelligence, telecommunications, defense, semiconductor. The speed at which this is being done is unprecedented. And I believe this is because America understands that India cannot be bullied. And if she's denied something she wants, Bharat will find an alternative, as has been demonstrated so often in the past. So some far-sighted leaders in the US, including President Biden, Jake Sullivan, and others, they are willing to take a long-term bet on the US's partnership with India. They understand that in the brave new world, whose contours are just emerging, India will be a paramount player. They want India on their side. So this GE F-14 engine deal, for example, that Ambassador Goel referred to so eloquently, this is a huge step. The first time that such proprietary technology is being given by the USA to any country. Let me also tell you, sir, during the 2020 Galwan clash, I was in the US, as I come here twice in a year. Most American commentators on global affairs marveled at India's ability to push the Chinese back. I believe that was an inflection point. They said, listen, guys, these fellows have an army, that is referring to Bharat, that can thrash the Chinese. Let's take a look at them again. Now, these are inflection points. What Robert Merton, my teacher when I was in the US many years ago, used to talk about the law of unintended consequences. The Chinese thought they'd browbeat us, but the unintended consequence was that the PLA was exposed as a paper tiger. And the world realized that India has the strength to thrash these guys and push them back. That again changed the perception. So you have all this so far, MOFA, all these agreements in defense and so on. Right. The reality is that what underlies the new India-America relationship is trust, is 100% trust factor.
Right, and Ambassador Vora, you spoke about the critical and emerging technologies. Now, I remember those visuals of Elon Musk coming to the camera and saying that, I'm a Modi fan. You had Neil deGrasse Tyson come out and, heap those praises on, Indian businessmen. Let's also talk about 5G and 6G, because that is something that Jake Sullivan has also spoken about, that on the high table, when the two leaders finally meet, 5G and 6G and the critical and emerging technologies is also going to be a hot topic. What might come out of that particular angle? What is being anticipated? Will we soon have 6G as well?
I think we're heading to 7, 8, 9, and 10G also very, very quickly, the speed at which technologies are emerging. India needs that technology. India has the capability to absorb it, to adapt it, to make it affordable. The United States understands this, that give it to India, and now there's no need to reinvent the wheel. Otherwise, the Indians are quite capable of going and doing it on their own. They have the brain power to do it. Well, important thing, sir, is that these critical areas, new emerging areas, are being denied to that big bad bully on our Northeast, but being shared with India. You remember when the Joe Biden administration passed a law that they would not share semiconductor technology with China and asked all American companies working there, American expatriates, to pack up and come back. Well, the Chinese came and said, ooh, terrible fellows, you want to stymie China's progress. Well, the Americans said, go take a bath. And they're giving the same thing. The same companies, I'm seeing the conversations that are taking place, Ambassador Goel referred to them, that those very companies, and the fruit company, the fellow who makes phones, what's he called, Apple, one of those chaps who is looking to shift from there to India. We can say that he's going to Vietnam, he's going to Malaysia, whatever. But India is the only country, sir, and I say this very deliberately, the only country with the human resource, with the size, with the capability to be a total successor, a total replacement for China. It's not China, or don't look at India as China plus, look at India as India, period. I mean, we are there and we are there. And that I think the world now accepts. 1.4 billion people, whatever the technological capability, the rising level of education, the purchasing power, etc., huge market, all that is there. America's business is business and India is open.
Well, it seems like technical difficulties over there with
every phone.
Ambassador Vora. All right, I'm going to quickly bring in Ambassador Goel here as well. Ambassador Goel, very quickly and briefly, civil nuclear, deals, that's also something that is going to be focused upon as well. There is also, a huge grapevine that's doing the rounds. It says that the importance of nuclear power in mitigating dangers of climate change is going to be spoken about, building small and modular reactors in India to export them outside, and talks on focusing on clean energy. But why is that? Because this particular bilateral may inject life into the moribund nuclear deal that was unveiled during the 2005-2008 era. On the civil nuclear front, what's exciting?
Let us hope that something happens on that front. Frankly speaking, because so much time has gone by, and in the case of the USA, as spoken by NSA himself earlier, it's not simply the question of willingness of the government. Most of the technology in this area is actually in the hands of the private industry, and therefore they have to realize that they can actually give the technology to India to its own benefit also. Now, coming to the modular nuclear reactor, see, the issues in the civil nuclear deal were not just technology, not just transfer of how to build a reactor, etc., but also the liability law that India wanted to use, and that was not acceptable to the American industry, because under the Indian liability law, anything that happens because of the technology imported from the USA, even if made by the Indian company, they would be liable. And they didn't want to accept that liability. Now, in the case of a modular law, which is a new technology, they will obviously work it out, see if it is beneficial to both. But it is going to be discussed like a private, commercial, and technology deal. So let us see what happens. I hope that something comes out of it, but let us see. And Kabir, just to come back to my request on the Vasudev Kutumbakam.
Right, sir. So, sir, see, yes. the thing is, Vasudeva Kutumbakam. To talk about the theme is going to be talking about the G20 summit, and I wanted to focus specifically on the Biden and Modi agenda. But, sir, since you so passionately want to talk about Vasudeva Kutumbakam and the theme of this year's G20, do go on. Do you want to throw some light? What's your opinion on the one future, one family, one world theme? Even as I say that, there's already a proper focus that's going to be laid on developing an international and a global digital infrastructure, a digital public infrastructure. That's also something that has been spoken about under the theme of Vasudeva Kutumbakam.
All I wanted to say, that when I was speaking earlier about this summit being the main platform to bring the developing countries and the developed countries together on the same attempt to basically not allow China to disrupt the current global order. And in the same spirit, I want to say that using the theme of Vasudev Kutumbakam was an approach which actually has injected life into this attempt. Why do you think China doesn't want Vasudev Kutumbakam in the outcome document? They don't want it basically because this is going to question how China operates in the world. That's all.
All right.
That's all I wanted to say for the time being.
Many thanks for that particular, input, Ambassador Goel. Both the ambassadors with us on the broadcast. I'm reading this headline from today's, National Daily. It says African Union to join the G20 as the G20 Sherpas have finally reached a deal. The African Union, something that's been, spoken about for months now, and back in September, various media agencies had spoken about how the Prime Minister has put forth, this seed of letting African Union become part of the G20 nations, become a member of the G20. The stage, it seems, is set for that. On that account, the European Council's president, he's given a reaction today itself. Let's listen in to what they had to say on African Union now becoming a part of the G20.
Prime Minister Modi asked a question. Can the G20 go further? Can we shift our fundamental mindset for the benefit of all humanity? And I believe we can. And that's why we are here, to get beyond the zero-sum mindset, to work towards mutual understanding, and to make the world a fairer place for everyone, no matter where they live. So I would like first to thank Prime Minister Modi and India for their leadership of the past year and for their priorities. And I look forward to welcoming the African Union as a permanent member of the G20, and I am proud that the EU we acted immediately in a positive way to support this candidature.
Well, Ambassador Vora, take a look at this. Membership of the AU in the grouping appears to be a major breakthrough. All of this under Prime Minister Narendra Modi and India's presidency. It is going to be historic now, isn't it?
There's no question about it, sir. How do you ignore a continent with 1.4 billion people, the same population as India's, perhaps a GDP much less than India's? But they are there. They're. You know, we've talked for 1,000 years about Africa being the continent of the future. It's the continent of the present. You can't leave out these people. I'm special advisor in 3 African countries. I'm over the moon because they are now going to be part, through the African Union, of G20, just as the European Union is, and Spain, for some reason, is a permanent invitee. I have no idea why. Prime Minister, when he gave his interview to a digital network a few days ago, remember? Digital network, that's India's strength, digitization. He said that when global leaders meet him, they are filled with a sense of optimism about India, especially its rapidly growing clean and green economy with a human-centric approach, sir, that can be replicated in other countries too. I'm only quoting Narendra Bhai Damodar Das Modi. He said, this is the India model that sees development in a human context. People above profit in a free, open, democratic, transparent system. This is what Africa wants. And as the Prime Minister said, that G20 must be G200, reflecting the priorities of all nations, big and small, rich and poor. Otherwise, it may fade into obscurity. So we're trying to prevent it. It's a work in progress. Long after the arc lights have faded in New Delhi, all these working groups, all the issues that have been raised about environment, health, etc., these will continue to be discussed bilaterally and multilaterally.
Absolutely.
India has carved a path. The path is not going away in the near future, sir.
Absolutely. Responsibility of the Global South is something that India has been able to put forth. And the Global South, let me again reiterate, is not third worldism for all those people out there. Global South is actually a region today. It manages to put on the global level the right kind of money, the right kind of stability, and the right kind of voices and strength on these global summits as well. Lastly, Ambassador Goel, even as we wrap this discussion, because we've spoken about, Ambassador Vora spoke about the critical and emerging technologies, about 5G and 6G that you spoke about. We also spoke about how, the previous visit, it is going to be a right time for both these nations to assess the execution and the implementation of what all they agreed upon last time around. But the Black Sea Grain Initiative, because Ukraine war, it just somehow makes its way into the party either by the door or the window. And the Black Sea Grain Initiative has a lot to do with the Ukraine war. Only recently, on the 17th of July, Russian President Vladimir Putin, he refused the renewal. And it seems like Delhi is being pipped to be the venue where this Black Sea Grain Initiative is going to be revived. Now, very quickly, Ambassador Goel, I'm just going to come to you. The importance of Black Sea Grain Initiative and why it should be revived, and how likely is the revival in Delhi?
I'm going to be very brief, Kabir, on this. There are 2 aspects. First of all, the food security of many countries in Africa has been impacted very severely, and other poorer countries has been impacted very severely because of the disruption in grain supply from Ukraine and from Russia. There are many other complexities in the whole deal, and this is being actually used by Europe and USA to put Russia under pressure in terms of agreeing to what Ukraine wants to export, but not letting Russia choose what they actually want to do with the oil. There are many complexities. So if it does come to India, it is going to become a huge responsibility for India. In a particular sense, we will have to basically be completely objective and not be seen as choosing sides. It's not an easy process. So let us see what happens. India can contribute very significantly in the process, but we will need to choose how we actually remain objective in the process and let Russian economy also get something out of it. I'm being very, very, because this is something where the options are not easy for India.
Well, absolutely. That's very well put. So essentially, it's a reformed globalization. Elitism quite clearly is absent from the G20 grouping. There is now developmental legacy after India's presidency, and it's going to be historic because if something like the One Future Alliance, the OFA, if something like that is approved, then it will be the third international institution to be pioneered under the Modi government after the International Solar Alliance. A biofuel alliance is also something that is on the cards, ambassadors, and the Coalition of Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. So after these two, if something like this happens, a One Future Alliance, then OFA is going to be the third international institution under Prime Minister Modi. Already we're talking about how the African nation becoming a member of the G20 is going to be a historical note. But apart from that, when you're looking at Modi and Biden, so many things that are going to be spoken about. Of course, 5G, 6G, the MQ-9 Reaper drone, defense ties, and the emerging technologies that is going to be taking the center stage. And of course, both these leaders are going to be talking about China. On that note, Ambassador Vora and Ambassador Goel, many thanks to both of you gentlemen for joining with us. I know we're coming to you at very awry times, Ambassador Vora, but always a pleasure to be speaking to you, and to you as well, Ambassador Goel. Well, that's all the time we have for you. Today, in the evening, Joe Biden is going to land in the national capital. All eyes on that dinner and bilateral. You can count on News 9 to bring you all the latest details. This is Kabir Naqvi signing off.
China won't let us rest easy on our borders, but they will keep flooding our markets. What does Xi Jinping really want?
I think he wants the Indian market, no doubt about it. It's really a matter of showing their dominance.
India's great Chinese conundrum.
Nobody can contain it. Not the United States, not China, not anybody else.
Frenemies. Streaming now.
He thought he could outlast us. And 1 year later, the evidence is right here in this room.
Who will blink first? So far from preventing the expansion of NATO, Russian actions have actually resulted in the expansion of NATO.
It's a mess for Russia and it's a mess for the Western world, for NATO and the United States.
Putin is a dictator, and if he loses, that means the end of his regime, and probably of him personally. So he has to keep going.
Year 2, no end in sight. Streaming now.
China won't let us rest easy on our borders, but they will keep flooding our markets. What does Xi Jinping really want?
I think he wants the Indian market, no doubt about it. It's really a matter of showing their dominance.
India's great Chinese conundrum.
Nobody can contain it. Not the United States, not China, not anybody else.
Frenemies. Streaming now.
The host city is